Benno Ohnesorg was a 26-year-old university student living in West Berlin in 1967. On June 2nd of that year, Ohnesorg participated in a demonstration with his fellow students to protest the arrival of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran, who was on a state visit to West Berlin. Left-wing students like Ohnesorg were outraged that West Germany courted the Shah, who they deemed as the leader of a dictatorship in the free world. The protests soon turned violent, with demonstrators who supported the Shah clashing with the students. Police stepped in and employed brutal tactics to de-escalate the situation. A riot quickly ensued, as students began throwing stones at the police, who wielded batons and began to beat and drag the students away. Ohnesorg fled to a side street called Krumstrasse, where he was shot in the back of the head by police officer Karlheinz. He died at the scene and fell to the ground in a pool of his own blood. This was Ohnesorg's first demonstration, and upon his death, he left behind his wife, who was pregnant with their first child. Kiras was put on trial, claiming the incident was an act of self-defense, even though Ohnesorg was unarmed. He was acquitted in November of that same year and would rejoin the West Berlin police force in 1971, up until his retirement in 1987. The bullet that killed Ohnesorg would change West Germany, sparking a social movement of mass student protesters in 1968. Participants were known as the 68ers, who rejected German political authority, which included former Nazi officials from World War II. The participants also protested the United States' involvement in the Vietnam War and conservative German entertainment. These young individuals wanted to break free from Germany's Nazi legacy and initiate a new cultural movement that uniquely represented their nation.
Marmor, Stein Eisen bricht,
As this broad cultural movement burgeoned, youth rejected mainstream Schlager music, a German pop genre that featured easygoing lyrics and catchy melodies. Dita Mubius of the bands Cluster and Harmonia commented, quote, "We were a lot of the times on the streets instead of studying. As young people, we were not very proud to be German. We were all tired of listening to bad German music and imitating American music. Something had to happen." By the end of the 1960s, a new genre of music was beginning to emerge by several new groups from West Germany. Initially, the music was known as Deutsch rock, and it featured a sound that was the polar opposite of commercial, easygoing Schlager music.
Say I gotta get out of here. I gotta look around.
It made its official debut at a rock festival in the city of Essen in 1968. The music was avant-garde and experimental, featuring elements of psychedelia, funk, free jazz, drone, and Musik concrete. Furthermore, the music was dark, spacey, and electronic, and served as a precursor to ambient music. Regarding the development of the genre, Jean-Hervé Perun of the band Faust stated, quote, "We were trying to put aside everything we had heard in rock and roll, the three-chord pattern, the lyrics. We had the urge to say something completely different." Some of the pioneering bands of the Deutsch rock genre include Can, Neu, Kraftwerk, Faust, and Amon Düül 2. As these new musicians were emerging, the British music press ridiculed the Deutsch rock genre and dubbed their music with the new name Krautrock. The word Kraut is an ethnic slur towards German soldiers that was used during World War I and II. For this reason, the term is now considered derogatory, and Krautrock was initially a pejorative word. However, as these music acts began to gain popularity in Britain, the term began to lose its stigma. Arguably, the first two Krautrock albums were Phallus D by Amon Düül 2 and Monster Movie by Can. Both of these albums were released in 1969. Phallus D has 5 songs, with the closer exceeding 20 minutes. The music sounds very strange, featuring hypnotic drums, chant-like vocals, and textured guitars. Monster Movie featured 4 songs, with the closer also exceeding 20 minutes. The music on this album took inspiration from the Velvet Underground and featured plenty of improvisation and layers of sound.
She said, "Do you rock?" She said, "Do you rock?"
Some krautrock music took inspiration from avant-garde composers Karlheinz and Stockhausen and Terry Riley, with the former being a pioneer of electronic music and the latter being a pioneer of minimalism. For instance, Ermin Schmidt and Holger Shakai of Can both studied Stockhausen before releasing Monster Movie. Can's second studio album, Tago Mago, went even more extreme than their debut and has been cited by Drowned Sound as, quote, arguably the most influential rock album ever recorded. Before recording Tago Mago, Olger Sakai recruited Damo Suzuki as the new vocalist of Can after Malcolm Mooney left the band in 1970. Over 3 months, Can engaged in 16-hour disorganized jam sessions with Sakai recording using a 2-track tape recorder. Sakai edited these extensive jams into a krautrock masterpiece, one that has been described as musicologist Julian Cope as an album that, quote, sounds only like itself, like no one before or after, in his book Krautrock Sampler. The aforementioned band Neu also played a pivotal role in defining the krautrock genre. Neu reached its genesis when Michael Rother and Klaus Dinger split from Kraftwerk in 1971. Their debut 1972 self-titled album was groundbreaking upon its release. The album rejected typical chord progressions in favor of long minimalistic jams over a single chord. For instance, the song Negativland experiments with guitar noise, while I'm Gluck features Indian-style drones and guitar loops. While the album was initially ignored, it has since garnered critical acclaim from Q magazine, citing the album as, quote, krautrock's defining relentless rhythm. Another krautrock classic was originally dismissed by fans as a sellout album, but is now considered the best of a series of 4 essential albums. The album was by Faust, and it was simply known as Faust 4. Faust was known for incorporating dissonance into their krautrock music, which would make them a precursor to ambient and industrial music. Released on September 21st, 1973, the album initiates with the self-referential song Krautrock, a 12-minute droning piece. Another highlight of the album is the song Jennifer, a more conventional piece backed by eerie organ and guitar arpeggios. Some other essential krautrock albums include UFO by Guru Guru, Zuckezeit by Cluster, Yeti by Amon Düül 2, Musik von Harmonia by Harmonia, Second by Agitation Free, Viva by Le Düsseldorf, and Alpha Suntory by Tangerine Dream, just to name a few. Some other artists I want to make sure to mention as influencers of the scene include Manuel Guching, Popol Vuh, and Embryo. By the mid to late 1970s, many of the original krautrock groups had disbanded or adopted a new sound. Faust and Neu would both break up in 1975, while Kraftwerk abandoned its krautrock roots in favor of electronic music. Cluster also distanced themselves from krautrock music in the mid-1970s and went in a more ambient direction by collaborating with Brian Eno. Can would continue to release krautrock records throughout the rest of the 1970s, but began featuring a more conventional style as they began to incorporate elements of reggae, world, and disco music into their latter albums. As these original krautrock acts began to go their separate directions, the genre created a tidal wave of influence on British music during the second half of the decade. For instance, David Bowie was heavily inspired by groups like Kraftwerk and Neu, and would incorporate elements of krautrock in his iconic 1976 album Station to Station. Bowie was so fascinated by the German music scene that he moved to Berlin later that year to record and release an art rock trifecta of albums entitled Low, Heroes, and Lodger, all of which featured elements of krautrock music. Krautrock music also had a key influence on the development of British new wave and post-punk acts like Susie and the Banshees, Public Image Limited, and Joy Division. Music genres like post-rock, ambient, new age, and even techno music were all heavily inspired by krautrock music. Even though it was initially mocked and dismissed by the press, it is now recognized as one of the most influential and interesting genres of music from a darker era in German history. Before we conclude this video, I just want to make sure I give a shout out to our patrons: Clueless, Hating XWX, Jim Venaria, Nicholas Cabello, Henry Hoyt, Andrea Leone, and Craig S. Tile. Thank you guys so much for your support. It means so much to us. Let us know in the comment sections what you'd like to see from us next. Thank you everyone for watching the video. Stay dreamy, everyone.